So I'm Larry Sutter. I'm going to be the moderator for this session. And I had a more lengthy presentation put together, but then it was pointed out to me that we kind of erred in that we didn't allow any time at the end of the session for Dr. Hooton to provide us with any comments. So he got half of my time, so we're splitting here. So you're going to get a much shorter presentation than I had, but the good news is I took out all the concrete stuff and I left all the incriminating pictures, so you should get the benefit of both. But it was actually kind of interesting. I put this together, a few days ago, and it was before the opening session, and there were some themes that were put out in the opening session that kind of resonate from what I'm going to talk about here. But what I just want to talk about really is the last 30 years, what I call 30 years of Doug time. And I haven't spent 30 years with Doug. I think only Barb is the one that has the scars from that ordeal. Anyway, and I'm not going to say everything that I'm going to talk about here I can attribute to Doug as like he caused it or he was part of it, but they all happened at the same time, and he was so he's guilty by incrimination, I guess. But anyway, 30 years of Doug time, and the theme that came out of when I started putting this together was the theme that came out of the session, the opening session, was this whole idea of networking. So I'm going to kind of just give you a brief introduction of how I got to here in this concrete world. And for me, the concrete journey started in 1994. And I'm going to have to use this because I can't see anything changing on the screen here. 1994 was also the year my daughter was born. And so it was a monumental year for my wife and I. And I was gainfully employed at Michigan Tech running an electron microscope lab. And so I came home with my wife 7 months pregnant, and I said, honey, I think I'm going to quit my job and go to grad school, which I did. I became one of the unemployed Michiganders and went to grad school studying concrete, of all things. 1995 was the first year I went to an ACI convention. So I went to the ACI convention in Montreal with my colleague George Dewey, who was active in ACI at the time. He's retired since, but he was active. And so we went to the conference. He introduced me to ACI. If you don't remember 95, it was a monumental year in Quebec. It was the year of the separation. Or the vote for separation. And if we have any Canadian friends in the room, I know that's still probably a little bit of a sore point with some. And it was definitely a sore point at the time. It was very interesting going to Montreal. And George is a very interesting, we call George a free spirit. He likes to do things. And one of the things he wanted to do was get memorabilia from the election, and we tried to find memorabilia, and anyone we talked to just turned their back on us and walked away. It wasn't a topic anyone wanted to talk about. It was a very bitter time. So anyway, that was kind of the backdrop. And again, this was my first conference, and we were really just kind of starting out with the concrete program at Michigan Tech. And so we were going to go visit Lafarge, and so one of the first people I met in the concrete industry was a young Al Ennis. And that's what a young Al Ennis looked like. He looked more like, who's the actor? He just passed it. Gene Hackman, thank you. He looked more like Gene Hackman than he did now. But we went to visit Al at the lab in Lafarge, and it was a very interesting conversation. It was no different than any other conversation I've had with Al in the last 30 years. Very candid, very open. Nothing was hidden, and I learned a lot. And I was learning a lot about concrete in general. I learned a lot about a lot of things in that conversation. He also introduced me to a guy named Paul LaHoo, who some of you may know. He worked at the lab. He was very instrumental in their characterization facility, and he got me involved with the International Smith Microscopy Association. So it was at that meeting with Paul and Al that I learned about the ICMA, and I had about a 20-year relationship with the ICMA in various capacities, and that was a big part of my career over the years. So I had that going on, and then I met a couple other people at that conference. I met a young Dave Darwin. I don't know if he was this young. This was a picture I got off their website. He just stepped down as chair, And so they're doing a 50-year retrospective, and he had a nice young picture, a picture of a young Dave Darwin. But my friend George Dewey did his PhD with Dr. Darwin, and so he thought I should meet Dave, and so we introduced him. He introduced us, and that was the first time I met him. And I also met David Lang. David Lang was an assistant professor at the time, and I met him because I was walking through the speaker ready room, and I saw a guy looking at SEM pictures, scanning electron microscope pictures, and that was my background. I spent 15 years doing electron microscopy, and I couldn't believe that there was even anyone at this conference that could spell SEM, let alone use one. And here he was doing it, so he and I started a conversation. So that's where I met David Lang. So again, all this is the first conference, 1 year into the concrete industry. I still even hadn't even made a mix yet, but we're meeting all these people. Peter Figisol was another one that we met. He left us way too soon, unfortunately, but he met him at one of the committee meetings. And of course, I met a young Doug Hooton. And that was, I've shared a story with Doug because he doesn't remember, but I remember. Again, George and I were at the meeting, and it was at one of the, I don't know which committee it was some committee, and the committee meeting ended, and George said, "That's Doug Hooton. We got to go talk to Doug Hooton. He's pretty famous. He's a big deal." I said, "Okay." So we'll go talk to Doug. So Doug was there. Doug was holding court. There's 20 people around him, and he was doing his thing, one at a time. Yeah, and he was being very gracious, as he always is. And finally got to us, and we introduced ourselves and what we were about, what we were doing. And he was very gracious, and we talked for a little bit. And that was where I met Doug Hooton. And so then fast forward a little bit, and here I end up in a boat with Doug Hooton fishing. I mean, back when I met him, I didn't think he was this guy. I thought he was more of a stuffed shirt, more of your typical university professor. And I find out he's this kind of guy who likes to sit out in the rain and fish, just like I do. And occasionally he gets lucky and he catches some fish, and it's amazing someone who fishes as much as he is, how bad he is at it, but occasionally he gets lucky and does catch a few. And we had a number of different fishing excursions, and by now you might be saying, "Don't you guys ever fish in warm weather?" This was down in Atlanta, fishing with Al and G. And we do fish in warm weather. We had a nice fishing trip with Dick Staley down in Florida, and Doug caught his bonefish down there, and we had a nice celebration and good times with Dick, who's left us too soon as well. Fast forward a little bit more, we finally, and Tom touched on this in his presentation, we started collaborating with Doug. And this is the part I cut out. I was going to go into more detail on this project, but I put the summary up here. This was a very important project for us. It was a very important project for the industry, a very important project for the DOTs. We really, working with Doug and working with Carl Peterson, we did some work that definitely set the groundwork for understanding how de-icers are attacking concrete, the whole oxychloride attack mechanism. We identified the role of SCMs in mitigating that attack mechanism, and that led to ongoing work by Jason Weiss and others to further this area. So this was really the foundational work that set that whole thing in place. And like I say, it was myself and Tom, and another disadvantage I have is I'm going last, and Tom went first, so he used all my pictures. So you're going to see some of the same pictures over again, but nonetheless, here's Tom and Doug at the ACI meeting in San Antonio. And as I mentioned, Carl Peterson worked with us for, boy, it must have been 15 years or more. He's in the middle, one of the best petrographers in the world. If you haven't met him, he's a unique individual and just a very talented individual. And he went to work at the University of Toronto as a faculty member after completing his PhD at Michigan Tech. So that's really the full circle. I mean, me going to ACI and stumbling around and finding Doug and others, and through the networking process, meeting people, talking to people, and things just move ahead. So it's been a journey for sure. This networking is very important in everything that we do, and it's a big part of what we're doing here at ACI. And I think the relationship I've had with Doug kind of epitomizes that. The other thing I've learned from Doug is to enjoy the journey. No one enjoys the journey more than Doug. And this picture was shown earlier. But I can't, this is our meal we had here just a couple of days ago went to Lakeview, nice chicken and waffles. Doug and I have been on many trips together, and we've had many wonderful meals together, enjoyed the company of many individuals over time. This was up in the Maritimes, a nice lobster dinner in the Maritimes, and maybe a cold brew in Delft, and friends there in Delft. And a little sashimi tuna down in Miami with our friend Bruce Blair. And then we took a trip together to Germany, so a lot of trips together. This was Finland. I have no idea what that was. I can't remember, but it actually wasn't as bad as it looked. I remember that. I've enjoyed the journey, and I've enjoyed taking the journey with Doug as we've moved along. This was in Cologne, a nice Kolsch beer and some German sausage. And the other lessons, I guess I will just touch on very briefly, is I have learned some professional things from Doug, and particularly when it comes to ASTM, how things get done. I watched him form the 948 committee on how interaction of cementitious materials and admixtures, and I saw how he developed that basically from nothing to taking documents, getting them done, and getting them started, and getting them adopted. And I saw that process and like, oh, I get it. You just got to kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. No one's going to do this for you. You just got to jump in and do it and ask for forgiveness later. And through that whole process, my saying has evolved that at ASTM, anything is possible, but nothing happens by accident. And Doug's a hard worker. Even when he's up there fishing, he takes time off from his extraordinary fishing expeditions to do a little work on the side. And he taught me to never think small. And through my involvement at ASTM, which again, I owe a lot of my mentorship at ASTM to Doug, I ended up being adopted into this very what the right word is, but it's a very important group of people. I mean, it's a group of people I didn't think I'd ever be associated with as a fellow of ASTM. And so, again, it's a journey, it's a path that I've been on, and Doug's been a big part of it. And, the big thing with traveling with Doug is just meeting people. I've met so many people through him and so many people with him in all these different places we've gone. Of course, Mike has left us way too soon as well. This was down in Florida at the Anna Maria Conference. A little trip to Ben's Chili Bowl in Washington, and good friends at the ACI conference. People are a very big part of that. As Rodney mentioned, we were down in Australia a couple of years ago and got to meet with a whole bunch of other people that I've never hung around with, and Bangkok for the conference there as well, and a little bit of fun out in front. So the people have been really important in learning so much about the industry through various other people. I think that, I guess it isn't that Doug necessarily did that, but he was there and he guided me and he was part of it. And so I associate all of these various activities with my relationship with Doug. So it's been a journey indeed. So, congratulations to Doug. This whole thing is kind of, the number of people have made it sound like he's retiring. If anyone has a clue, Doug ain't retiring, I'm here to tell you. So this isn't a retirement party, but he's going on to his next chapter, obviously. And congratulations on a great career and what you've done so far, and I'm sure you're going to keep doing great things as we move forward. So thanks, Doug, for all you've done for us and for all you've done for me as well.